Hello, Libertarian here. Today, I want to talk to you about a recent poll that was released by Pew Research. It talks about basically the public trust in the U.S. government. It is low, to put it mildly, and it's getting lower. It's honestly been low for some time, but now it's near historic lows. How low can it go? I think it's like a game of limbo, where with each successive poll, they poll the people and then there's like a pole that you have to crawl under and it just keeps going lower and lower every time. We're at like the limbo championships here. Let me show you a couple of slides. First, I want to show you this slide from the Pew Research Center. Public trust in government near historic lows. Only about 1/4 of Americans say they can trust the government in Washington to do what is right just about always, or most of the time. So just about always is 2%, most of the time is 22%. You add those together and you get 24% of people actually saying that they can trust the government to do what is right either always or most of the time. The other 76% don't trust the government to do what is right, not even most of the time. Look at this graph. Now, back in the Eisenhower and Kennedy days, fresh off of World War II, there was a patriotic fervor going on back then, fighting the Japanese Empire, the Nazi Germany, but that didn't last too long. Back then there was like 75% government popularity. It quickly started sliding down once the Johnson administration came in, then Nixon, and by the end of the Vietnam War, it was below 50%. Fast forward to Reagan and Bush, you're looking at, around 40%. Now, there was a small spike right after 2000 for the September 11th attacks. Everyone got kind of patriotic. That shit tends to happen when, crazy, attacks and wars and stuff happen, but it didn't stay up there for long. George W. Bush, experienced quite a slide in popularity, and the government as a whole experienced that slide in popularity after the September 11th shock wore off. Obama was not that bad of a president, all things considered, but, trust in government during his reign was very low. I don't know why Trump had a slight uptick. I think they just pulled, too many MAGA hat wearers. But anyway, the numbers are not good, and they're not good for Biden right now either. Less than 1/4 of the American populace thinks that they can trust the government. Let's look at another slide. Here we go. COVID-19 is making trust in government worse, not only in America, but worldwide. Read this real quick. In an already divided nation, a new study finds COVID-19 is making a poor political situation even worse. A team from the Pew Research Institute in Norway and the University of Aarhus, I don't even know how to pronounce that, polled 6,000 adults from the US, Denmark, Italy, and Hungary during the pandemic. And the distrust levels were pretty high. Now, I couldn't fit the entire article in this screenshot, but let me read you a couple of snips from it. Here's a quote. Our investigations show that the psychological toll of living through a pandemic also stoked anti-government and anti-systemic attitudes that led to political violence in a number of countries. Gee, you think? Right now, there's protests happening in most of the Western world, including the US, Australia, the UK, Germany, France, Italy, also in a lot of the former Eastern Bloc countries. People are not happy with the heavy-handed approach that government has taken to the pandemic. And here's another quote. Results reveal a strong connection between higher psychological burden due to COVID-19 and people displaying more anti-government sentiment and a tendency for violence for political causes. Hey, I'm not a fan of violence, but I am a fan of anti-government sentiment. Man. And here's another quote. Study authors suspect that lockdowns and government restrictions have unequally impacted certain social groups. Well, of course. This study also says that it creates the perception that government is creating more injustice in society. And that's true. Government generally does create more injustice in society, not less. Despite the fact that they often try to equalize things and reduce inequality and reduce injustice, they make it worse. Essentially, governments around the world are responding to the pandemic in ways that are satisfying nobody, or almost nobody. And trust in the leader's ability to make the right decision is going down. Trust in the guidance and directives that are released by, the various health ministries and disease control centers and things like that. The trust goes down as people experience the harshness and heavy-handed approach that these institutions dish out. Let me show you another slide. This one's one of my favorites because this is a graph specifically about congressional job approval in the USA. It's been low for some time. This graph goes all the way back to 1974, and the trust was barely above 30%. It crept up to 40% at some times. Then in the 90s and during September 11th, it had a big spike, but then it quickly went down again, down to the low 30s, and also sometimes dips into the 20s. It looks like as of 2021, it dipped to 26%. Congress is one of the least liked institutions in the USA. There's not a lot of institutions or companies, whether public or private, that are more despised than Congress. And it's well deserved too. Everyone knows that these congressional bodies are just full of liars and fake plastic suits. They'll say anything to get a vote. They're two-faced. They never fulfill their promises. The customer satisfaction is essentially very low. People don't get what they pay for. They don't get what they ask for. It's a failure of democracy. It's a failure of central planning. It's a failure of economic planning. It's a failure of centralized policy, and I think it vindicates the idea of a decentralized, individualistic approach to organizing and conducting, society as a whole. Now, I want to contrast these horrible numbers that we just saw with numbers that show approval ratings for the private sector. Let's see how it compares, public versus private. This is a graph showing U.S. customer satisfaction with Amazon.com. I'm sure you heard of them. This graph goes back to the year 2000 and it stretches all the way to 2020. Now, in the year 2000, their rating was at 84%. It looks like it peaked at various times up to 88%, which is pretty high. Now, the graph shows what looks like a big drop starting right around 2017. That drop is not as big as it looks because this graph is cropped at 78%. The graph only goes between 78 and 90%. So a small shift is going to show the line go up or down really big. But regardless, starting in 2017, this graph shows Amazon's approval rating go down from 86% to 79%. That's a 7-point decrease, which is not the end of the world. It's not great, but even then, even at 79%, which is the lowest rating that Amazon has ever had since they started, since the graph starts in the year 2000, that's still more than double the approval rating of government. Depending on how you're counting, it's damn near triple the approval rating of government. So even after Amazon loses a lot of customer approval, it still manages to triple the approval rating of the government. Now let's look at some other companies. Here's various graphs for tech companies' approval ratings. Google leads the pack at 82% approval among customers. Apple's got 74%. Facebook has 58%. Facebook gets a lot of shit lately, and it is deserved. Despite that, Facebook has about double the approval rating of the government. The company that gets the worst here is Twitter, which has got 34% favorable, 36% unfavorable, and 31% don't know. I agree that Twitter is probably the worst big tech company out there. They deserve it. This crappy approval rating. But ironically, Twitter is known for being disproportionately populated by lefties and Gen Z self-declared socialists and shit like that. So maybe that has something to do with their low approval rating. Also, I think the fact that Twitter is run by the worst CEO in big tech, Jack Dorsey. He sucks, and he's not doing Twitter any favors. I think the shareholders would be wise to kick him out of the position, but that doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon. But regardless, Google and Apple with 82% and 74%, they're tripling, almost quadrupling the approval ratings that government gets. It's amazing. It's such a blowout. Now, let's look at a company that isn't a tech company and isn't an internet-based company. I decided to show you guys numbers for an automaker, one of the big three. Now, I'm a fan of Ford Motor Company. Let's take a look at their approval ratings. This is actually from 2010, but the numbers are still relevant. Poll ranks Ford highest for customer satisfaction with quality. 84% of customers who purchased a 2010 model year Ford Lincoln or Mercury are satisfied with the quality of their vehicles, a 4 percentage point improvement since 2009. Now, Ford's quality has gotten even better since then, and their vehicle offerings are arguably even more compelling. Their sales are doing pretty good. I would not be surprised if the number of 84% is either the same now in 2021, if not higher. Again, what we're looking at is a private company, a big company, that has an approval rating in the 80+ % range. No poll that I've ever seen about government, aside from that brief spike during September 11th, has gone anywhere near 80%. They barely ever get past 40%. So I hope through these slides I've been able to show you a consistent theme, a recurring theme, where the private sector absolutely dominates approval ratings relative to the public sector. And the reason is that because free markets, competition, and consumer choice are the ingredients to make happy consumers. The risk and reward factors with competition and customer choice lead private service and product providers to produce a better quality product and more bang for your buck. You've heard me say the phrase bang for your buck before, and it's absolutely true in this case. The public sector does not perform relative to the private sector, and that's why the government sector leaves people so unsatisfied, leaves people wanting more, leaves people wanting choice. But the people don't have choice in the public sector because a democratic government is a monopoly. It is a winner-take-all system. People say, oh, with democracy, you have choice. No, the 51%, the majority have choice, and then the 49% have to go along with it, even if they don't want it. Imagine 51% of people vote for Ford, and then 100% of the people have to buy a Ford. No one's going to be happy. 49% of the people are not going to be happy with that, at least. So when you have consumer choice and private incentives and competition and free markets, you're going to have providers that provide a much better quality product. The public sector, it's the opposite. They have a captive customer base, and they can just continue to pump out the same shitty product year over year and leave people unsatisfied, and they don't have to worry about their revenues. They don't have to worry about their customer loyalty, because it's going to be the same regardless, because you still have to pay taxes no matter how much you don't want to fund the drone strikes, no matter how much you disapprove of the banker bailouts, you're still going to have to pay for them. That is not true when it comes to whether you buy something from one retailer or another, whether you subscribe to one service or another, whether you drive one kind of car or another. Now, where I see the most bootlicking pro-government sentiment nowadays is with the Gen Z lefties. There's so many of them. And they always talk about how they want more government in the abstract. They always talk about how they want more welfare, more government healthcare, more government housing, a government jobs guarantee, universal basic income, and on and on and on. But they're talking about it in the abstract ideal sense. When you give them the experience, the personal experience of a specific interaction or involvement with government, they end up being unsatisfied. They end up protesting. They end up talking shit. They end up, rightly saying that they didn't like that experience. They don't like very many real life government programs or leaders in any specific instance. And in contrast, while these same people talk shit about private enterprise, they poo-poo profits and capitalism. They talk shit about stock markets. They talk shit about wage labor. They end up loving these specific companies. They end up loving these privately produced products. That's why they're Starbucks socialists. That's why they sit there and say, smash capitalism, and they use their iPhone, and they love their iPhone. They end up loving the customer choice. They end up loving the free market's customer service and product quality. They end up loving the quality and bang for your buck that competition and the free market provides. What these idiots need to do is wake up and realize that real life trumps the abstract, and that the private sector is what we need to defend and expand, while the public sector is what we need to attack and shrink. Thanks for watching.